26th meeting to order. We have a revised agenda. We'll get into that, but the first order of business, pledge allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary, read the roll, please.
Chairman Aida.
Here.
Commissioner Camillo.
Here.
Commissioner Claffey. Commissioner Fox.
Here.
Commissioner Payne.
Here.
Commissioner Sobieski.
Here.
Commissioner Woods.
Here.
Commissioner Vitalica. Commissioner Braverman.
Here.
Commissioner Giangrave.
On several of the items, public hearing and under new business for the 550 Cedar Street, Cedar Point projects, I will not be sitting, and Commissioner Braverman will be sitting in my stead. The Vice Chairman will run the meeting as he has for the last 2 or 3 meetings for those items. And then when those are over, I will come back in and take up the rest of the agenda. We have an approved agenda, different some changes. Give it over to the town planner.
Right. It's a revised agenda because when I prepared it last Friday, I'd forgotten to include the executive session item where the commission is going to go into executive session to discuss a couple of some pending litigation. And I felt that was too important an item to just, in fact, probably legally, to just add to the agenda tonight. So that's why it was a revised agenda. But since then, I received I received a request from the applicant for the Coranian subdivision to continue it again to the next meeting because they're still trying to work out a resolution to the problem with their property having been merged with some land that was supposed to be part of the open space for the Bridle Path subdivision. So they've asked that those 2 items be taken off the agenda for tonight. So I recommend you delete items, public hearing, item C, which is petition 31-18, that's the special permit for the rear lot. And new business item B, petition 30-18, which is the subdivision itself. And if there's anyone in the audience that's here on those 2 items tonight, they will not be taken up.
Okay, very good. Do we need a motion to approve?
Yes, please.
Can I get a motion to approve the?
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Second. Motion made and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item on the agenda, public participation. Anyone from the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, any remarks by commissioners? Seeing none, we'll get into the public hearing. Turn it over to the vice chairman. Get all the way through here, through the minutes, and all the way through to here. Gotcha. Okay, and then I'll come back for
Okay.
Very good.
All right, if I could have the secretary read the procedures for the public hearing, please.
The order of proceedings at a public hearing shall be as follows. A, convening by a chairman. B, reading the notice by the commission secretary or a commissioner designated by the chairman to act in his stead. C, identification and location of the property involved by the town planner. D, a statement of the issue to be considered by the chairman or the town planner. E, presentation by the applicant limited to 20 minutes unless a specific extension is granted by the chair. F, persons wishing to speak in favor of the application limited to 2 minutes per person. G, persons wishing to speak in opposition of the application limited to 3 minutes per person. H, rebuttal by the applicant limited to 5 minutes total. I, rebuttal by the opposition limited to 5 minutes total. During a public hearing, it shall be within the discretion of the chairman whether the time limitation should be varied slightly, provided the commission consents to any such variance. In no case shall an extension for more than 20% of the allotment indicated above, or 1 minute, whichever is greater.
Thank you. If you could read petition 24-18, please, and petition 25-18. We'll group the 2 of them together.
A, petition 24-18, zoning text amendment, new section 3.26, workforce assisted housing district, in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, section 8-30G, Dakota Partners, Inc., applicant, Timothy S. Hollister, 1 Constitution Plaza, Hartford, Connecticut. Contact continued from September 12, 2018. B, petition 25-18, zoning map amendment at 550 Cedar Street in accordance with Connecticut General Statute, Section 8-30G. Dakota Partners, Inc., applicant 550 Cedar Street Associates LLC, owner Timothy Hollister, 1 Constitution Plaza, Hartford, Connecticut. Contact continued from September 12, 2018.
Okay, thank you. Any applicants here?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, staff, ladies and gentlemen. Attorney Tim Hollister representing the applicant with the same development team supporting consultants that we have been here before. The procedural situation is that we were at Wetlands on the 18th last week, and we did not finish. I guess the good news is that the main issue was the planting plan and whether we had eliminated enough invasive species to, from the planting list, or I should say, proposed enough native species to be appropriate for the site. So there was an agreement to consult with the town's consultant and one of the commissioners and Mr. Hinckley's office, and that is the revised planting plan was submitted today, and the Conservation Commission will reconvene. They granted us a special meeting on the 2nd of October, next Tuesday, at which time we are hopeful that we'll be able to close the hearing and that they'll vote, and hopefully that vote will be an approval. So for that reason alone, we have some business to take care of tonight, but we are going to grant hopefully one final extension of this hearing to your first meeting in October, which is the 10th. So that said, we do have a couple things to cover, mainly things that arose when we were here on September 12th. These are summarized in the memo that Mr. Minor distributed to you that bears today's date, and we're just going to go through those. So I'm going to start off by asking our consulting engineer, Will Walter, to talk about a couple of those items.
Thank you. For the record, Will Walter, professional engineer with Alfred Burnesh and Company. Craig, can we go to the slide that has the conservation easement? Thank you. So as a part of a request by the Inland Wetlands Commission to place a conservation easement over the western portion of the property, you can see what we've done up here. Oh, gonna hand these out. And so you can see that originally we had proposed a 40-foot strip that was parallel, hugging the western boundary line. That resulted in about 28 or 29,000 square feet of easement that we were going to place over that. What we've done is we've gone back and we've actually increased that. And you can see what's up there. We're placing a fence along the western part of the developed portion of the site, as I've discussed several times. That conservation easement essentially sits basically parallel to the fence, 3 feet off of the fence. And the reason being, if the fence needed to be replaced or repaired and it's going to have footings, it just allows us a little bit of room to get in there and do the maintenance or replacement that we need. And so this conservation easement actually is a little north of 50,000 square feet. So we feel like this is something that the Inland Wetlands Commission is going to be happy with. Craig, can we go to the next slide, please? I believe that's the rendering. Thank you. So there's several other site plan changes and items that I wanted to discuss that were coming out of Inland Wetlands and that were discussed at the last hearing that we had. The first one is the space for snow storage, and I'm just going to read our response. Although we agree that snow storage on the sidewalks could cause issues, the on-site maintenance will be such that snow will be removed from the sidewalks as well as the drive aisles and parking spaces. We feel the potential cons of providing snow storage between the curb and the sidewalk outweigh the pros. Specifically, during wet periods, people will need to cross soggy conditions to get to the sidewalk after they park their car. And then secondly, if snow is piled between the curb and the sidewalk, people have no way of getting to the sidewalk from their car. So we feel like we understand the comment, we understand why it's been requested. We don't feel like it's a better design, and then the applicant is gonna have on-site maintenance that is dedicated to removing the snow, not just from the bituminous areas, the drive aisles, the parking areas, but also the sidewalks. There would be the potential, if the sidewalks were set back 5 or 6 feet, the plow comes along and pushes the snow, now we get a pile of snow between the curb and the sidewalk, and how do people get from their parking spaces to the sidewalk? They're just not gonna be able to do that, so, that's why we're not proposing to modify any of the sidewalks. The second, item is, there was discussion about providing a secondary access, back on the north, specifically down through the industrial property. The fire marshal and the police chief have both reviewed the plans and provided comment regarding health and safety. The plans have been modified to their satisfaction. The suggestion or requirement for a secondary access was not included in any of their comments. There's a 60-house development just east of the property at the intersection of Cedar and Vincent Street that does not have secondary access. It's only got one access in and out. An access to the north of this property also would require an easement from the adjacent parcel. Additionally, the northern neighboring property is approximately 18 feet below the northeast corner of our property. Therefore, the access drive would require major grading and retaining walls on the neighboring property and result in grades most likely exceeding 35%. Standard engineering practice typically dictates a maximum of 15% grade for access. An access drive to the east, if we were to come off the northeast part to the directly to the east, would require easements through 2 adjacent properties, as well as the reconfiguration of the immediate neighbor's parking to allow for traffic to maneuver through his lot. So we'd be impacting him and forcing him to remove parking spaces from his lot. The next thing that I want to, and the final thing I want to discuss, really comes out of the Inland Wetlands Commission, and it has to do with the plantings. We've revised our landscape planting plan. Essentially, we've provided some more buffering on the north, and then the west, up kind of between the clubhouse and the northernmost building, and then around that northeast corner, we've provided significantly more buffering. That came as a result of the Inland Wetland Commission third-party soil scientist reviewer had made those suggestions, as well as a few other suggestions. We believe we've addressed all her comments to her satisfaction. And then one of the commissioners on the Inland Wetlands Commission took issue with a couple of the species of trees that we had. Those species were outside the buffer, but nonetheless, we have changed those. And the species were a Bradford pear and a honey locust, and we've replaced those with other species which we believe will be acceptable to her. And right now, she's reviewing our plan. But again, we believe that it'll be acceptable to her.
That was with, outside their conservation area?
Correct.
Maybe they want to sit at the table here.
I mean, we're trying, as has been stated by Attorney Hollister, we're trying to make a good faith effort
I understand.
and answer as many questions that we can and as many plan changes that are within our ability to do that. So,
Okay, thank
even
you.
though it was outside their jurisdiction, we went ahead and did that. So those are the plan changes. I'm more than happy to take questions at this time.
Any questions from commissioners?
Yes, just for my clarification, when I was going to try to get Alumni Road realigned with Commissioner Payne, we were going to close off the western approach to Old Farms. And if I remember correctly, Commissioner Payne says we couldn't do that because under the new regulations, all developments needed 2 accesses. The one that you're referring to on Vincent Drive was done prior to the last revision in zoning. So I just want to make that specifically clear. Okay, that's the reason why I was concerned with, and getting back to this, the reason why I was concerned is if something happens, this access, you'll really have no way to get in and out of it. That was my concern, and it still is a very big concern of mine. Thank you.
Where are you quoting me, Stanley, so I can look it up?
Please look up when we were going to close off
You have a minutes?
Vincent Drive on the Alumni Road.
Do you have minutes
No, I can dig them out if that's what you need.
Well, I'd like to know where you're quoting me so I can double check it. And if I'm not mistaken, we were talking about a development with a lot of houses in there, and you're talking about Vincent Drive.
No, I'm talking about Old Farms, is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Old Farms, when I wanted to close off the west junction of Old Farms, and you had specifically said that we couldn't do that because our regulations require 2 entrances into a development. So at that time there, if I'm not mistaken,
That's because there's quite a few more houses in that area, but that would be up to the fire and police.
right, but you had talked to Lieutenant Morgan, they didn't want to close that off, so they were going to put a gate
Yeah,
there. That was
so-
my point.
So I like the fact that you corrected it. Lieutenant Morgan suggested that we leave the driveway open so that they could enter in there. But
But
that
my-
was for a large development of, I don't know how many houses, but over 300 probably.
But it's still, my point is, it's still a secondary access. I was
this-
trying to make my point here.
Yeah, but that's a little bit different than a development like this. So I just want to make that point clear. Okay, the applicant can answer anything if he wants. If not, do we have any other questions? Yes, Commissioner.
We'll agree to disagree on the sidewalks, and I understand, there's pros and cons to it. Again, personally, I still think you're making it much more difficult to maintain. Your choice. My question is, the path on the north side, I'm assuming it's either stone dust or wood chip path.
Stone dust, correct.
Is the purpose of that for dogs? Or is it
No,
just a?
it's just to provide open space that's usable by the community there. There's going to be a large rain garden back there that is going to serve function for treating water quality, but it's also going to be very aesthetic as well. We're going to have a lot of nice plantings in there. Part of the town requirements require a certain percentage, a certain square footage of usable open space, and that's an area that we've identified that it could be nice for the residents. You could take your dog back there, just take a cup of coffee, just
Yeah, I
walk
assume.
with your kids back there, something like that.
Okay, I assume that's what its purpose was
Yep.
for like a dog walk, which would be a good idea. Well, no, other than that, I'm okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through the chairman. I just want to go on record as advocating for a second entrance and exit here because, as our former chief Klett had pointed out, I think in the first meeting, once you get some apparatus in there, especially if it's one of the trucks, the tower ladders, you got a high, large diameter hose there, and nobody else is going to get in there. So it can be dangerous for those that have to go around Cedar Street and possibly circle. And that'll be a heck of a circle, though. So I still advocate for a second driveway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just so you understand, our experts didn't agree with you. Our expert chief, police chief, and our fire marshal didn't see that was required. So I just want you to make sure you understood that. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner?
Yeah, I had one more I forgot. The Board of Education sent out a memo on the radiuses in here that they don't seem to fit the turning radiuses for the buses. So if you could take a look at that and you don't have to answer me right now, but
Well, I can tell you that,
or if you have the answer, fine, I'll.
there's parts of this answer. I can tell you a bus would make it through there because a fire truck will, but we're not bringing buses into this site. We'll be talking about that with our traffic engineer, but we will not be bringing buses into here, so that's going to be a non-issue.
But it's because the Board of Ed chooses not to, correct? If in fact a bus wanted to come in here, the turning radiuses in this complex would allow a bus to make it around.
That's correct.
That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Does the town planner have anything?
No.
Okay.
Go to the next slide. So since we last talked, the board was generous with their comments, and we've made some changes to the building elevations, and we hope that this has improved the design and brought it in line with what everyone's hoping for. Next slide, please.
one of the major suggestions was to increase the size of the dormers, that they were perhaps a little too small, and that so we've grown the size of the vent dormers, which are up in the roof, and those are now 4 feet wider each one. And then the major dormers, which engage to the wall of the building, are also wider. They've gotten wider and taller, more prominent, stronger. You give a stronger feel. So next slide, please. This image, you can see those, and we'll see them again in the elevations in a second. But that the scale has grown, and it feels like it fits the building better. It fits the overall scale of the project better. So next slide, please. This is predominantly unchanged. As we dug into the details of the siding, and we've got a sample board to show you in a second, we shifted to a 5-inch clapboard reveal on the base, which felt more appropriate than we had an 8-inch clapboard previously, and we've shown a 5, and we've got that in our sample board as well. So it's really a note on the building that's changed on there, but we wanted to enter it into the record. And the next slide shows the scale of the dormers as they've gotten larger, centered over larger windows and more across and spread across the facade on that end as well. And for the next shows these siding patterns, and we have the actual colors here. So these colors here are the actual samples and of the color palette of that material, and it's a certainteed product. And we've got the white trim band breaking up the building here, the green at the upper, and the I think it's called a sage on the lower end. With the autumn red as an accent, we've got a color sample here showing what the center panel would be there.
How wide will your board in the center and your corner moldings be? Is it 5-inch, or is it going to be bigger than 5?
It's a 5-inch. We didn't want to go too wide on it to make it too strong.
Okay.
To make it, it sort of really pronounces the corner there, so it's a 5-inch corner board.
Okay.
And for the roofing, we've picked a gray. So this Georgetown gray, it's not a hard black. It's a little softer, a little lighter color. So this color here is the tones we picked for the roof shingles as well. And yes, the last image just repeats the other image just so that the board could see this a little longer if they want to. Those are our changes. We hope they are improvements.
Yeah, I see a noticeable improvement on that. Comments from the commissioners on this new information? Commissioner Fox.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I'm confused. If I remember correctly, the secretary had read the petition, for the public hearing for the text amendment. Did we go into site plan, or?
No, they presented it a little early.
Yeah, okay. No. All right, thank you. And through the chairman, I have to appreciate the fact that you did bring in the materials as we asked, and did something with the dormers. I'm not too happy with the colors, but that's me, number one. And to me, it still seems like some wide expanse of these windows. No dormers, not dormers, no shutters, or maybe some even fake balconies, so that it might look like your projects, your developments in Brookfield and Suffield. Lost my train of thought. But I still think it does need a lot of work. And as long as we're talking about the buildings themselves and the elevations, I noticed every time I look at these, which is a good thing we've been getting these extensions, I noticed for the first time a lift, a basement lift. Now that goes from the basement to the first floor only. Is that correct, in each building?
Yeah, since the last meeting, there's full elevator service throughout the building.
Full elevator. Oh, thank you very much.
Now an elevator to all
thank you
4
very
floors.
much.
We were really, for cost constraints, we were hoping to, we're trying to make this affordable, but we've been meeting with the state of Connecticut, and they've strongly recommended, so we've added an elevator for all 4 floors.
Okay, thank you. One more question. In each of the buildings, you have the main entrance, then you have a side entrance on either side.
Those really just fire doors.
Yeah, fire doors. Now,
They will be locked. You won't be able to enter those.
yeah, okay, because I was wondering why you have them in the front, but you have a central hall, running longitudinally that there's none in the back.
Correct, and it's really for safety and, we want people, if ever there was an incident, we want people to come towards the center where fire safety folks would be to help them. We didn't want folks going in the back. Some parts have steep grades, so it works really well to come towards the middle where people could collect for safety if ever there was an incident.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
And it will
Yes,
say,
Commissioner Woods.
Just a couple of questions. In the memo that was given us tonight, dated September 26th, which was a response to the questions, on the bottom of the first page for the washer and dryers, it states in here clearly that the elevator is from the first floor to the basement only. Is that changed, or is it stated wrong in here? The floor plan, as had always been since we filed this, has been an elevator from the first floor to the basement. This week, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority told all its multifamily housing developers that they want an elevator from the basement to the third floor. So that did not even exist when we were here on September 12th. It is a new requirement which we've agreed to do. The other aspect of that is I confirmed this with Mr. Thompson. It's a relatively small plan change to the floor plans of the buildings because we do have the building, the elevator in the basement of the first floor, and my understanding is the space above that was service closets, so we don't have to, essentially, we don't lose any units. Not a redesign.
Change. I'm sorry?
There's not a whole redesign to get it to go up.
It's not a whole redesign, but you're correct. I guess I wrote the elevator piece this morning, and by the time we finished this afternoon, with the new requirement had been reported, so.
Well, again, I think
I
think
know.
we're all very happy to hear that. I think it makes it a better project for everyone. But I think it's even the mention of an elevator from the first floor to the basement. Because before, I believe it was a lift, correct? I don't think we used the word elevator. I think you used the word lift,
it was a lift.
like a chair lift. Which,
Yeah, I think
my
that-
experience with them, they're nightmares.
Well, there's going to be an elevator.
That's good. And then my last comment is, I think you've made some great strides in improving the looks of this building, and I appreciate, taking the criticism. It's not always easy when especially if you're designing something, you think it's great, and then all of a sudden your client says, well, maybe it's not so great, and then you got to go through a board like us. And but I do believe I appreciate the effort that you've gone through. You are listening to us. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
It was touched, Steve Ullman with Alfred Benish Company, traffic engineer. It was touched on already about the buses into the site. Yes, the bus will make the turns. It's a shorter wheelbase than the fire truck. We ran through it. In emails and things with the Board of Ed and the Transportation Department, they do not want to run buses through the site. We have an email from Dean Barnes, it's in your file, that says they'll have a bus stop on Cedar Street. We're working with them to where to locate the stop properly. I went through the bus route schedule, and there are a few stops along Cedar Street already. There are several times during the day that there's a bus stopping at Cedar at Vincent. There's a couple times a day that stops at a private home, and there's another stop at Cedar at Old Farm as well. So it's not like it's unprecedented out there. So that's what we found.
Thank you.
Any other questions for traffic or any other? Yes, Commissioner Woods.
I would just like Planner Minor to address this back to the board, that in fact, I understand the board's position is they don't want to bring buses in, but I think it should be stated back to the board that this development would allow buses to turn in it safely. So it's up to them whether they want to bring them in or not, but, I mean, their email clearly states that they don't think that the buses will turn in there, and they didn't take the developer hasn't taken that into consideration. And
So you want the town planner to inform them that all the radiuses, if they choose to drive into into the property, that all the radiuses and everything, there's enough room for them if they choose to drive in there. Okay.
If I could ask Mr. Minor on the record, was the Newington school, public school person who reviewed, was he looking at the first version? Remember Mr. Walter's office revised the turning radius between the time that we submitted the June plan and the time that we started the public hearing in August. I'm just wondering if maybe he was looking at the first version of the.
Probably.
It's fine, if you just state that the revised plans allow it, you know, and that's fine.
Okay.
But I just think we should get that on the record,
Okay.
okay?
All right, so the town planner will send a memo to them that the revised plans show that there's ample turning radiuses in there for the buses if they choose to go in there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, if there's nothing else,
I need to set up Mr. Bristol's comment. One of the items that Mr. Minor gave you is a email that's addressed to Town Attorney Ancona at the top. The body of the email is an email from a Sandra Austin Goldstein that was given to both the Conservation Commission and the Zoning Commission, and it comments in large part on the soil remediation plan. And I asked Mr. Bristol to respond at Conservation last week, and I just wanted to summarize his comments in the same manner tonight.
Thank you.
Hey, Robert Bristol, for the record, with GeoInsight. So there was a number of questions that were in the email, and I provided written responses in the memo, but I'm also prepared to present those responses and answer any questions. The first item was a question about the use of US EPA method 418.1, which uses Freon. And this is something that we note in our August 2018 environmental report, that a previous consultant back in 2000 had used that EPA method to analyze some of their soil samples. But then that method was phased out in 2009 because it used Freon, but also because it often produced false positive results from pieces of asphalt or things like that provided misleading results. So it was phased out in 2009. However, that method was not used at the site since the year 2000, since that previous consultant used that method. And certainly all our samples that we analyzed out there for petroleum hydrocarbons were using the more current method of analysis. Also, there were 8 other questions pertaining to the environmental areas of concern that we had identified in our 2018 environmental report. I wanted to make note that there may have been some confusion on the part of the commenter. Table 1 in the report does summarize all of the soil results from our recent investigation in 2018. However, the previous sampling results were all provided in the appendix. There's a separate soil table in the appendix. So there may have been some confusion on her part. I'm not sure on that. But anyway, there were 8 specific items pertaining to those areas of concern. Area of concern 2, there was a question I need to find. Excuse me a second. For AOC 2, the question was, it states, AOC 2 does not show elevated levels of ETPH. Data provided shows non-detected. Previous reports indicate that ETPH at non-detect limits from at least 2011 to present, and that no follow-up is needed. But as indicated in Figure 3 of our report and also in that soil table in Appendix A, there was an elevated concentration of petroleum underneath a former septic tank, and therefore we do include that area in Figure 5 of the remedial action plan, which is being excavated out as part of those remedial actions, and that's shown on Figure 5. The next question, AOC 14 does not appear on the 2018 list, so actual amounts are unknown. Again, we indicate on Figure 3 of that report and also the soil table in the appendix that there was an elevated concentration of petroleum in the shallow soil from that area. And therefore, again, we show on Figure 5 in the remedial action plan that this area is being excavated out as part of the remediation out there. The third item, AOC 18 does not show elevated levels of ETPH. Data provided shows non-detect. Previous reports indicate that ETPH at non-detect limits from at least 2011 to present, and that no follow-up is needed. Again, we indicate on that Figure 3 in the soil table in the appendix that there were elevated concentrations of petroleum in this area, and therefore, as we show on the Figure 5 of the remedial action plan, that that area is being included within the environmental land use restriction as part of the remedial action plan. The fourth item is AOC 20B, and then also, as indicated on Figure 3, there were elevated concentrations of ETPH in this area that had previously been remediated to industrial commercial criteria back in 2011. So as part of the remedial action plan, this area is also being included in the environmental land use restriction. There's four other comments that are provided in the email. AOCs that show elevated levels of arsenic and lead on immediate previous reports have not been retested. As shown on Figure 5 of the 2018 report, there was a localized area of lead impacted soil on the slope, which is being excavated as part of the remedial action plan, and indicated on Figure 4 and the soil table in the appendix. There's also a localized area of arsenic impacted soil that's near the auto body shop, or the previous auto body shop, that was remediated back in 2001. However, other elevated concentrations of lead and arsenic were not found at the site. The next comment, almost all volatile organic compounds, PCBs, and metals like arsenic and lead have not been tested at all. How do we know if the land is suitable for residential use if these aspects are not tested? In accordance with the Connecticut DEEP guidance, each of the areas of concern at the site was tested for potential constituents of concern, which did include volatile organic compounds, PCBs, metals, and or other compounds as appropriate for each specific area of concern. And that information is all provided in Table 1 and also in that soil table in Appendix A. So there was, in fact, numerous samples throughout the site that were tested as appropriate for those particular compounds. The comment for AOC 19 currently has an ETPH level of 1,400, more than twice the residential limit, but is not being indicated as an area that will be remediated and or have an ELR, I think is what it says. In 2011, the GeoInsight engineers indicated that remediation of soil and or ELR to restrict site to industrial commercial was warranted. Neither happened. As shown on Figure 5, the remedial action plan, the impacted soil in this area, which again is that area on the slope, is being excavated as part of the remedial action plan. So that is being already included. And then the last comment, AOC 16 currently has non-detect levels of ETPH, but only 3 sections of this AOC were looked at. In 2011, 21 sections were tested, and based upon analytical results to date, at that time, petroleum impacted soil had concentrations more than 7 times the residential limit, even exceeding industrial commercial limits, and the engineers indicated that remediation or ELR was warranted. Neither happened. My response, elevated concentrations of TPH were previously reported at 3 borings in this area that's north of the buildings. However, the analytical data was from 18 years ago and was collected using that former method 418.1, which can provide false positive results. However, as we indicate throughout the report, we conducted 10 additional soil borings throughout that area, testing those same 3 locations that were previously reported as having the TPH. The laboratory did not detect petroleum in any of those 10 additional borings, and therefore we concluded that further actions for that area wasn't warranted, other than we do need to do groundwater monitoring down gradient from that area. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Questions from the commissioners? Anything? Yes, Commissioner Woods.
I see that there were underground gasoline tanks. I had actually asked that.
Yeah.
But it appears, at least this would tell us, that it doesn't appear that they were used for gasoline. They were used for oil storage. That's what this, or at the time that maybe they were taken out, they were used as fuel oil, old car oil storage.
Yeah,
There were 5 tanks.
Yeah, in response to your question at the last meeting, we did go back and look at all the information. There were 5 underground storage tanks that were in use that were removed back in 1988, and then subsequently there was some contaminated soil from petroleum tanks. The tanks were reportedly used for motor oil and waste oil. There was a bunch of other phases of assessment out there also to look to see if there was any underground storage tanks that may have been in use. There were record searches, there were a series of test pits, soil borings throughout the site, and there was a ground penetrating radar survey that was done throughout a good part of the site, also looking for the potential presence of tanks. Based on all that, there were not any tanks or other subsurface structures that were found, other than those 5 that had been removed. And in addition to that, we didn't find any evidence of contamination from gasoline. Typically, aromatic volatile organic compounds are associated with gasoline, and those are the primary constituents that you would look for gasoline, and we did not find those in the soil or groundwater at the site.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Town planner have anything?
No.
Okay.
Okay, I will finish up with 3 items. There was a question about the parking enforcement system. It'll be pretty much the standard system that we see in multifamily. Vehicles registered, make, model, year, plate information, a resident sticker system, and then signage stating that illegal vehicles will be towed at the owner's expense. So that seems to work in other contexts. There's a question about whether there could be a washer dryer in each unit. Cost prohibitive, but on the other side of the scale, the cost of the facility, building and running it, is actually drastically reduced. Whole hot and cold water lines, drains, venting, etc., with a common laundry facility and I would add this to the memo. The fact that we now have an elevator for the whole building, I think, should make that common facility more palatable for the residents. One of the items that Mr. Minor gave you tonight is an email that has my name at the top, September 24th. Again, this was a matter raised by Ms. Goldstein. And it actually related to the wetlands application, but her concern was that the property on the assessor's records of Newington is shown as being owned by 550 Cedar Street LLC. Well, that was true until 2010. 550 Cedar Street LLC was a subsidiary of Stop and Shop, and in 2010, it was merged into the parent, so that the subsidiary became part of the parent. But it's the same company. It always has been and still is. So the point that I discussed with Attorney Ancona was that our application says that Stop and Shop is the owner and Dakota is has the authorization to go ahead with the land use applications. That was true when we filed our applications. It's true today, and so there's nothing, there's no procedural defect or issue with our application, and Attorney Ancona agreed. He asked me to put that in an email, and that's what that is. Last thing, there was a question about whether there could be preferences in leasing to residents of Newington. The general consensus among land use and housing lawyers is that that is not allowed under the state and federal Fair Housing Acts, and it's certainly not allowed in the state of Connecticut under what's called the affirmative fair housing obligations in the affordability plan, which is just making sure that the availability of the units is publicized. You don't just publicize it in Newington, you publicize it, beyond the border. So, the one thing that can be done legally and will be done is that people within Newington should know about the housing opportunity, and if they apply.
Oh, 1 second.
Remember, we're 1880s technology here.
It's working.
Dependable.
I think she took offense at that, but
Well, no, it's not. I'm sure she would like something upgraded.
Okay, go ahead.
So the residents of Newington should be encouraged to apply early so that they have a favored place on the first come first serve in terms of complete applications. But that certainly I think will happen in the normal course. But we can't hold places for particular people. So, Mr. Chairman, that is everything that we wanted to cover tonight. Commissioner Fox correctly said, did we jump ahead to the site plan? Everything that we've covered tonight is still, in my mind, in the category of, is this property and the plan that we have appropriate for the zone change text and the rezoning that we're proposing? It's all, in my mind, one application with 3 parts. So thank you for indulging me, so we didn't have to go and do the presentation 2 or 3 times. But we're just trying to save the commission's time and energy on that. So that's all we have for tonight. 10th of October, Craig, and I'll give you a letter to extend. I think we're still fine on extension days.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right,
Okay.
good.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chairman.
Is there any other questions? Commissioner Woods and then Commissioner Fox.
In public hearing.
Yeah.
I just have one. I had asked it at the last meeting, and I'm assuming you don't have any information to give me. That's why I don't see it, but I want to ask it again about if you could find any data, the percentage of people that would be expected to move into this complex that don't have transportation, their own transportation. It would depend on public.
Car?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh,
Would
okay. Yes, you did ask that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll finally get that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, through the chairman, Attorney Hollister, I'd like to ask a question or two about the text amendment itself. Basically, it's just, I'm just wondering what the rationale is for some of these sub-regulations, such as in 3.26.8, you call for a 40-foot height limit as opposed to the 35-foot in our regulations. And, you can go through all, this text amendment and quite thoroughly and find a lot of these sub-regulations that kind of do not coincide with ours, that would supersede ours. And number one, I'd like to know the rationale for that. And number two, and 3.26.30, can I ask you a question? Like, what does Westport have to do with us? I mean, it leads me to believe now that this is a boilerplate.
Well, that one provision is, you're right. I believe, I thought I had corrected that at the first hearing, but you're right, that should say Newington. No, well, I'm not going to call it boilerplate, but this is certainly a form of an application that we have used probably 65 times over the last 15 to 20 years. The good news is it works in practice, so we keep using it. But as far as your first question, absolutely. In 830G, the model or the sequence, if I can call it that, is that the design firm and the engineer come up with a plan that works on the site and that is often not in sync with the existing regulations. I mean, that's really why 830G was passed by the legislature in the late 1980s, because they felt that around the state there were parcels of land in towns that were too restrictive. 8 acres in near the center of town with sewer and water should not be for single-family homes only. I mean, that exists around the state. So the 830G is the opportunity to take the design that fits and then build a regulation around the design, as opposed to starting with whatever the regulations are and see whether it fits or not. So, I mean, that's been the model of 830G from day one. So, for example, the 40-foot height limitation is because the buildings are 40 feet. I mean, there's no secret about that. I mean, this is, and you may recall my first presentation back in early August. The other reason you customize a regulation is to combine the site-specific standards, bulk dimension, setbacks, and so forth, with the affordability rules, which is a good deal for the town because you get to know exactly what's going to be built on there, because it's not a 30-foot setback that might be a 60-foot setback that might be something else. You're going to get exactly the setback that's shown on the site plan, and if by putting the affordability rules in the text, you can enforce them, just like you can make sure that the residential program that we laid out in terms of maximum rents and maximum incomes and who's eligible, that's going to be enforced. Your zoning enforcement, we're going to file annual compliance reports, and if the zoning enforcement officer sees that we haven't complied with what we said we're going to do, that's a zoning violation that needs to be corrected. So again, it's at this point a time-tested model over almost 20 years, and so we keep using it because it works.
It works for you, I guess, but I don't know if it works for me. I understand what you're saying. I don't quite agree with it, especially, and this popped out at me right away because, I don't see, 8-30G, notwithstanding, what's wrong with the 35 feet? We've lived with it for quite a while.
Well,
And, it works for us.
right.
So.
Well, first of all, and buildings like this and in a location like this, I'm not sure there's a material difference between 35 and 40 feet. If it was 60 feet and it towered over a single-family home, then you have an issue. But I just don't, given where the buildings are next to a commercial zone, next to the railroad tracks, it's a more comfortable design for Mr. Thompson's firm to work with 40 feet. And, you get into pitch roofs and heights of dormers and stuff. That affects the design.
No, I agree. The only other question or comment is in 326.22, you talk about a special exception not needed for, where am I? For earth removal, and again, I don't see why you wouldn't require a special exception for something like that, which we always do. So.
Well, my experience with what I'll call earth excavation regulations is that if you are proposing an amount of excavated material that you're going to use for commercial purposes, that should be a site plan use, because you're really kind of setting up a mini business in conjunction with your development. But where you're just taking out, only the material that you need to construct the development, which is certainly the case here. This is not no one's going to, be selling fill or excavated material. It should be part of the site plan process, and if you said, here's where we're going to excavate, here's the depth, here's the amount of material, here's what we're going to do with it, it should be fairly mechanical and not a discretionary. The way, every town is different in that regard, but what I see mostly in other towns is that if you're just doing the excavation as necessary for the development, that does not require a separate special permit. I think that's the better practice.
Okay, well, thank you. And I don't know whether I read something wrong with, and I doubt if this would ever happen, like maybe putting another building in that area.
No, there's no other construction going on in there. He's answered that the last meeting, that there's just what was proposed there.
I'm sorry.
He can confirm that with me.
Sometimes my memory slips, Commissioner.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
No room here for any additional building. You'd wipe out the parking.
Yep. Town planner, how tall was the proposed building at the other end of Cedar Street? For the nursing area?
Well, I don't recall exactly how tall that building is, but I just took a look at our regulations. And currently in the PD zone, we do allow residential buildings as high as 4 stories. In the PD zone, we allow office buildings as high as 5 stories. And in the BBT zone, we allow buildings as high as 45 feet.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if there's no other questions, we're going to go to public participation. I want to remind the public that the public hearing is going to remain open into our next meeting on October 10th, I believe. And so if you have something new that you'd like to add, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition?
Neither opposition or for it. Gary Bowles, 28 Burden Lane, Newington. At your meeting on the 22nd of August 2018, I stated that the remediation of any remaining contaminated soil on the site in question should be completed to the full satisfaction of the town and state, and of course this commission. At your last meeting on 12 September, a representative of Dakota Partners stated that the remaining remediation is done as construction gets underway. I do not believe that this is correct. On any site that still contains contaminated soil, just like the site over here where the bus garages were, it is always removed first before any construction is started or a shovel goes into the ground. The reason for this is because you simply don't want to take the chance of any remaining contaminated soil being mixed with the non-contaminated soil. Then it all becomes contaminated. Also, at the 12 September meeting, I made the suggestion that there be rear ingress and egress for this development of 108 units. A couple of you nodded in agreement, which I appreciate. To the best of my knowledge, Dakota Partners never addressed until tonight my suggestion of the importance of the rear ingress and egress. I wish we had this on Vincent Drive and my neighborhood of Burden Lane, Cinnamon, Nutmeg, and the other street, but we don't. But at least we have off of the south end of Cinnamon. If necessary, we could go down through the Eddy Farm property, just like they drive their trucks on. So that's where I'm coming from. I just want to see this project done correctly. I know sometimes developers, not especially Dakota Partners, but sometimes developers try to cut costs. And let's have this thing done correctly, done right, and maybe it'll be a good thing. But these situations that I just enumerated need to be addressed. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition?
Yeah, good evening. Bill Prentice, 61 Maple Hill Avenue. I got a couple of concerns. Does anybody know how many children are going to be in this? I guess.
It was talked about, there was a,
I know, I missed the last meeting, so I don't know what it
there
was
was
talking about.
approximate number. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was 20-something.
32.
32, was it?
Saying up to
Yeah, but
32.
you have to understand that it's totally out of our control on how many kids go into a development.
Right,
It's-
but I'm
we
just-
don't have the purview to
But you're
vote.
talking $16,000 a child for the education system.
We don't have the right to vote down a project because it has too many kids in it.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, what happened to the sidewalk on Cedar Street? How are these people that don't have a vehicle getting in and out of here without getting killed?
The developer has agreed to putting sidewalks in the front of his property.
So where does it get them to?
Well, hopefully the state will install sidewalks on their property, and then hopefully, so, I mean, we can't make the developer really put sidewalks on other people's properties.
Well, and you're going to stop a school bus on Cedar Street at 7:30 in the morning and at 8 o'clock in the morning, if you have that many kids in there. There's got to be middle school kids and elementary school kids, correct? I would think, out of 32. There's got to be something in there.
There could be. And they will stop there in front of there, just like they stop in other areas on Cedar Street.
Yeah, but the ones he's talking about at Cedar Street are one child that's special needs. I mean, I know the people, so it's a bus stop and one kid gets on, one kid gets off. When you're taking 10 or 12 kids off a school bus, the whip and the traffic's gonna be unbelievable. So, that's all I got. Sidewalks to nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition?
Good evening. Brian Haggerty, 529 Fenn Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, for allowing me to speak. A few points I'd like to make. People are leaving the state in droves, and Newington has not been immune or shielded by the exodus that's leaving the state. Just a couple quick points. I believe I've read that one-bedroom units are being listed for around $1,100 a month, and two-bedroom units for around $1,300. Just a quick number crunch, $160,000 mortgage at 4% over 30 years equates to a monthly payment around $760. You add property taxes, that number's around $1,100. A quick Zillow search yields around 40 properties in Newington today, either houses for sale or apartments or condos for rent, and the majority of those are 2 or 3 bedroom units. And if you reverse it, your $1,300 a month payment for a two-bedroom mortgage or a month equates to around $185,000 mortgage, and that adds another dozen properties. So 50 properties in Newington today, comparable cost to what they're projecting. There's plenty of affordable housing in Newington. You don't need any more. Luckily, there's no state tax dollars being allocated for this. Even better that there's no local tax dollars. But the federal government subsidizes this, and the federal government gets the money from us. We're paying for it. Secondly, you don't need a traffic study to know that the traffic on Cedar Street is absolutely terrible. One of the representatives from the developer had suggested that should the site have been developed for a big box store, that the traffic projections would be even worse than what they are projecting. The issue with that logic is that the lesser of two evils is still an evil. A bad idea does not default into a good one just because you're suggesting a different alternative. A bad idea is a bad idea. And I believe Attorney Hollister had said at the last meeting, quote, "The applicant obligation is to maintain levels of service at nearby intersections and to make sure there are no safety concerns for tenants or pedestrians." End quote. And with Cedar Street at its functional capacity, I don't see how that's possible. I don't see how they can maintain that. And Mr. Chairman, I believe 2 weeks ago, someone had made one of the other commissioners made a point about the traffic, and you said, well, it's not so, if you can't develop this property, then you have to shut down the rest of Cedar Street. And I understand, I don't think anybody's suggesting that Cedar Street is so bad that it needs to be shut down. I just think that it shouldn't be developed further the way that it currently is.
Very good. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? Anybody else? Well, Does the applicant want to address any of these now, or you want to wait until next meeting?
Just one point, Mr. Chairman, on the construction sequence and removing the contaminated soil. I believe the gentleman misconstrued what I said last time. The point is that, well, 2 points. All of the contaminated soil will be removed from the site. There's no question about that. That's what Mr. Bristol's soil remediation plan is all about. What I said about the sequence is it's not realistic to say that we do a complete removal of the contaminated soil and then we start the land use process. It's the land use process that determines the sequence, which is now on the plans, that coordinates the remediation and the construction. And in fact, you recall you asked, Mr. Acting Chair, that we revised the condition of approval. So the building permit for the part of the building where there'd be soil remediation, and we agreed to do that because that makes sense. So I think the gentleman was confusing the fact that we will be removing all the contaminated soil with the fact that there is an integrated construction sequence, because this remediation plan grows out of the site plan process. That's all I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
No problem. Any other, anything else? Okay, we're going to leave this public hearing open for petition 24-18 and 25-18. Next thing on our agenda is approval of the minutes of September 12th. I'll entertain a motion.
So
Make a
moved.
motion.
Motion made. Do we have a second? Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
through the Chairman, Noreen, have you finished the September 8th minutes? We never did get those back.
You will have them for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering.
Next thing on our agenda is petition 26-18. I'll have the secretary read that.
Petition 26-18, site plan approval at 550 Cedar Street, Cedar Point. In accordance with Connecticut General Statute, Section 8-30G, Dakota Partners, Inc., applicant Stop and Shop LLC, owner Timothy Hollister, 1 Constitution Plaza, Hartford, Connecticut, contact.
Thank you. Does commissioners have any additional questions for the applicant on the site plan here before we,
I hope not. My team just left.
I noticed that. That's why I was going to raise my hand.
No, I think we kind of incorporated it, didn't we, into the...
yeah. Commissioner Fox, you all set?
Well, the only question I had is something that both Commissioner Sobieski and I have been talking about, and that we just talked about the sidewalks. All well and good that we cannot force the owners of the properties adjacent on the other side of the bridge, but I mean, you're building a sidewalk to nowhere. I think maybe if negotiations can be made to get that sidewalk all the way up, it would be a lot more palatable. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions? All right, very good. We'll see you next meeting. Thank you. And at this time, I'll turn this over back to the chairman, Frank Aida.
Okay, item B, we took off the agenda. Next item is item C. You want to read that, Mr. Secretary?
Petition 27-18, site plan approval at 181 Petition Geranova Drive, Hartford Hospital, owner, BL Companies, applicant, Donald Sumides, 129 Petition Geranova Drive, Newington, Connecticut, contact.
Is the applicant here? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and make your presentation.
I don't have a presentation for the board. Where would you like colored boards to go?
I
went old school, sorry.
Yeah, okay. I used to have an easel. I might still have an. Oh, okay.
I just didn't know what would be
Okay.
the best place to place it.
You want up there or-
I put it down there for the people, because we all have maps. Up to the chairman.
We put it there so the people can see it. We have plans here, and if we have to, we could turn it.
Okay. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Jessica Bates. I'm a senior civil engineer with BL Companies in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm a registered civil engineer in the state of Connecticut with a PE license. I'm here to talk about the parking lot expansion at the Hartford Healthcare facility at Patricia M. Genova Drive. I believe that my coworker Matt Bruton was here in July, I believe, and presented a slightly modified version of this plan to you. Since that time, there were talks between Hartford Healthcare and the Jefferson House regarding the need for the Jefferson House to have additional parking because they are, I believe, landlocked and they have parking needs where they end up parking on the street. So we have revised our plan to add approximately 30 additional parking spaces that will be utilized as overflow for the Hartford House. I'm sorry, for the Jefferson House that is located, but the parcel is located on the Hartford Healthcare lot. So as people can see, this is in the back of the Hartford Healthcare facility. It kind of fronts the John Stewart Drive, and it's a fairly minor parking lot expansion. We're abutting an existing parking lot next to a driveway. We have revised the grading to remove the subsurface detention system out there. We are now using a more low-impact development sort of design with curbless pavement, going across an energy dissipator to a grass filter strip, sediment forebay, and then a micropool extended detention for the water quality functionality of the system. The soils on site are largely wet with a very high clay content and a very low permeability, so we're unable to infiltrate groundwater back into the soils. So it will be clean, it will be detained, but then it'll be a controlled release back into where it was going originally. So, I mean, I would like to be able to infiltrate it, but the soils out there just aren't conducive to it. The parking lot expansion conforms to all zoning regulations for interior landscaping, setbacks, driveway widths, parking spaces, everything like that is in conformance. We do have to do a minor modification to the existing parking lot closer to Hartford Health to add more ADA spaces as a result of growing the parking lot by the additional 130 spaces. We will be utilizing the new change in building code that allows us to share the hatch spaces between two adjoining ADA spots. And by doing that, we're able to just modify that parking area just slightly to bring it into conformance with ADA requirements. We've had discussions with the engineering department as well as your wetland agent. We've gone back and forth a few times with the engineering design of the stormwater primarily. The engineer is amenable to the micropool extended detention that we have provided here, but if he has any additional comments, you know, we would be more than willing to work with him and get a final approved plan between, you know, he and I. That's really kind of it.
That's good if that's all you have. Okay, any questions from the commissioners on this? It's a minor change. Mr. Planner, engineer report, or what's the process for the engineering?
I don't have a written report from the town engineer, although I did speak to him just a couple hours ago. The original plan, as some commissioners, or the initial version that some commissioners may remember, did not propose any LID. So the staff reminded them that they need to provide LID to the maximum extent practicable. So they came back with a plan, which you're looking at, which shows a wet basin, which means there'll be water much of the year, which means there could be mosquitoes breeding. And when the town engineer realized that that was the result of what he had asked for, he suggested to the applicants, well, maybe there might be a better way to provide stormwater management to this site without encouraging mosquitoes. So the engineer told me today that he recommends approval with the condition that the applicants revise the plan to address some other issues that he has. And I don't have that in writing. That was orally from the town engineer earlier today. He is satisfied that they can address all of his earlier concerns, which were of a technical nature. And if the commission has any questions, I'll try to paraphrase what else the engineer has told me.
Mr. Woods.
So are we going to go back to what the original plan was that was for this, like a galley system? The water will be retained now underground, correct? I believe that's what was designed before.
Yeah, originally we did
Like a septic system.
It was more like the plastic chambers,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
yellowy orange ones. We can do something like that. After speaking with the engineer yesterday afternoon, I kind of started playing around with, even just pipes, just pipe, like regular watertight pipe, like a 48-inch or something like that. And we could probably utilize something like that, because then you wouldn't have to wrap it because we're in groundwater and things like that. So there's a bunch of different things. It could be concrete galleys, it can be plastic galleys, it can be plastic pipe, but there is definitely an easy way to put it back underground again.
Right. It's just not LID, but this site doesn't lend itself to LID.
Well, actually, if I remember right, the other plan that we had in front of us too kind of had a rain garden, but the rain garden really wasn't productive because the soils won't allow any water to go back into the ground. So it was kind of there for looks, but they were trying to achieve it, but weren't able to.
Right.
Actually, the only other question I have, Mr. Chairman, how does Jefferson House access this? I mean, I understand how they can get in and park.
There's
but
a walkway.
There's a walkway?
There's a walkway here that they're proposing, which goes
You can see it in the colored version
Yeah.
here, but there's a walkway here to stairs, and then a mid-block crossing, and then there's more stairs going down.
I missed it. I see it now. Okay. Thank you.
Any other commission comments? Any questions? Okay, what is the pleasure of the commission? Want to move this to,
Move it to old business for, and take
Make a
action on
motion
it?
to move to old business.
Take action on it?
if you have a motion prepared, I would consider moving it tonight.
Yeah.
You want to move it tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. Get a motion to do that?
Make a motion to close the hearing and move it to old business to vote on tonight.
Motion made and second. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll add this as item, the item under old business. Take it up tonight for an action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, town planner's memo.
Newington Ridge
Newington
Preserve.
Ridge
Right.
Preserve.
Okay, I did not get a chance to go out there this afternoon, but I've been told that the the developer is on site, that he's got a construction crew that's been out there, that they milled the top 12 inches or so of some of the road, so they are in the process of doing the work.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the whole road is built.
Yep.
Any questions, comments from the commissioners?
So I'll keep this on the agenda for the next meeting and to provide another update.
Keep it on the agenda until we get a resolution.
Right.
Old business, we want to take up this item that we just had, the draft motion. Do you want to read that into the record, Mr. Secretary? The motion.
Make a motion. Petition 27-18, site plan approval at 181 Petitia M. Genova Drive, Hartford Hospital, owner, BL Companies applicant, Donald Samoids, 129 Petitia M. Genova Drive, Newington, Connecticut, contact. I move to approve with conditions petition 27-18, site plan approval at 181 Petitia M. Genova Drive, Hartford Hospital, owner, BL Companies applicant, Donald Samoid, 129 Petitia M. Genova Drive, Newington, Connecticut contact. Conditions: 1, the plan shall be revised to the town engineer's satisfaction.
Second.
Motion made, second. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, you're all set. You have an approval. Just check with the engineer to make sure that you're both on the same page. Okay, great. Thank you. That ends the old business. Next item is executive session. I'm going to move over that and go into petitions for public hearing scheduling. Planner, going to go over those items.
Okay, these are in the folder when you arrived tonight. The first item is for a church at 2175 New Britain Avenue. There was a church in this property some time ago. I went back and read through the records. Normally, once a location has been approved for a particular business, it runs with the land. But the church that was there before, the special permit issued by TPZ specifically said that it's not transferable. So I told the applicants, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to come.
Which piece of property is this? Can you locate it for us?
Well, there's a child, a daycare there. There used to be a daycare there. It's to the north of town. Let's see if I can.
It says New Britain Avenue.
It says New Britain Avenue.
Oh, that's a typo. Okay, that's a typo. The application, there's the application in the folder when you came in.
Application says Berlin Turnpike.
I'm saying, because I looked at it and I'm saying Kidco, that's on the Berlin Turnpike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And only the numbers go that high on New Britain Avenue.
Yeah, I thought it was maybe down at Twin City,
What I
but I'm
thought, yeah.
saying,
Still the
then
numbers aren't
I
that
saw
high.
Kidco and I'm saying, well, someone has to explain.
So it's the old Kidco building?
No, it's 2175 New Britain, Berlin Turnpike.
Okay,
Yeah, that's a typo on the agenda there.
okay, that makes a lot more sense. There was a church there, I believe they moved to the Shriners.
Yes, exactly.
And, go ahead, schedule it.
Right, okay. And then the next item, the manager of the Artichoke Pizza place that was approved by the commission last month came in to have his liquor license signed off by me, since I'm the acting CEO. And I unfortunately had to tell him, well, no, you need a special permit from Newington TPZ to sell liquor at your restaurant. And I said, well, that's the bad news. The good news is I can put you on the agenda for the commission to schedule your hearing at the next meeting so you won't lose any time. And so that's what this is. This is for that pizza place that was that you approved at your previous at the August 22nd meeting. Now, there was a concern about the building itself. Okay, this is the building it's on the corner of Brockett and Berlin Turnpike. And commissioners may recall that the owner of the two properties, this is where Sculptures is, and that what used to be a little house on the Berlin Turnpike that had a succession of different businesses over the years. That property was approved for a site plan modification last year, and as part of the rather lengthy approval process, the applicant said that he wanted to substantially remodel the building that was there. It ended up being demolished, and a new building rebuilt on the same footprint as what was shown on the site plan that the commission approved last year. And because the footprint was the same, the staff met with the chairman at the time when the building permit was being issued, and the decision was made that this was the same as what P&Z saw when the site plan came in for approval, and so it was not an issue that the staff and the chairman felt should be held up. It has since then come to the commission's attention, though, that there's a second story, and some of the commissioners were not under the impression that there was supposed to be a second story. So I went back and looked through the architectural renderings that were given to the commission back in 2017 when the overall site plan was approved. And I can display them tonight. It is pretty clear that the plans, the architectural renderings that you were given back in 2017, do show a second story in the replacement building.
Why don't you put those up so that we could look at them? Because the way it was explained to me as the chairman, they had taken down the building. It was explained from the staff that if they put it back, they would put it back exactly the way it was approved exactly the same footprint, on the same foundation area, everything the same, and it would look exactly like the plans that we approved. Under those conditions, I said, yes, if it's exactly of what we approved, then let them, they had already knocked the building down, go ahead and rebuild.
Right, no,
Now we see the building up, and we see windows on the second floor, which I was under the impression that all of that was false facade, and that was supposed to be a duplication of the buildings in the back to meld with the rest of the plaza, and the parking and everything else was we've only taken into consideration the bottom floor, I believe. So this
Right.
is what's out there now. There's definitely a second floor. I don't know how many square feet the second floor is, 1,000 square feet?
I don't know, but I can find out. But as the commission can see, it is pretty consistent with, I lost it.
Right there.
There should be the word architectural's in here.
I don't know, we never asked the question at that first
Oh,
meeting.
there it is.
Whether they were using the second floor. I don't know, did we? Apparently we did.
I think my assumption was that it was a faux second floor, like Walgreens, but it's
Wasn't
not,
here.
it's
I don't
real.
even know.
Do you remember, Stan?
No, I don't remember. I always thought that was just a facade up
That's
there.
what I did too.
Yeah.
And,
I do remember you reporting back when the planner told us that the building had to come down, which made sense, and you did state specifically that they needed to keep it on the same footprint. Well, they have the same footprint, but no one ever talked about.
And no, and I
Yeah.
specifically said that it had, the architecturals had to be per what was approved,
Yeah. Although-
original, had to be the building that was approved, the original approval.
Well, and I
That's
guess-
the building we want.
Is that the building that this commission approved?
Yes.
Oh, well, then it has a second floor.
I don't see an air conditioner protruding from the top, though.
True.
And are those windows, which is the
Where do you see the
elevation
air
that
conditioning at?
faces the turnpike?
I think he sees
Are
it.
those
Yeah,
windows?
turnpike
What does that
elevation.
say?
Person, there.
With
It's
the
not on the
arrow
plan.
pointing.
Yeah, let me see if I can make this bigger.
There was a second floor in the original building,
Yeah, there was a second floor on the original building.
picture of it.
Yeah, we know that.
An
There
apartment,
was.
right?
Yeah.
That was
Probably
days
was
ago,
legal,
apartment
but-
years ago.
For some reason, I thought that was all fake facade, and that's the way, I don't know, you seem to think the same way I did, Stan.
I mean, everybody thought that, I thought. But I guess you have to check the minutes, too. Besides looking at the architecturals, I think.
But we never asked the question, what are you doing up there? I know at one point, when we were talking about, I recall that he was talking about a Botox doctor going in there, and I don't know what else. That was specifically, he said, well, the doctor that does the Botox is gonna be taking that space. And I don't know whether it was the second floor, and then he talked also about storage, and I don't know if it's in this building or the addition that he put onto the other building. It's kind of fuzzy, so I think we gotta look at the minutes, but the way, I don't know, what's it say? What are those things pointing to what's the note say?
Which note?
And the turnpike
To the
elevation.
windows.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the
Yep.
top note,
yeah.
pointing
All
right to the
right.
window.
Yep, all right, let me,
On the turnpike elevation.
I know, I'm looking, to try to figure out how to make this bigger. There we go.
No, go the other way. Go this way. No, it's the other way.
Just go down, you can highlight that, keep going down a little bit lower with the cursor, a little bit lower. See that bar? No, just bring the arrow, there you go.
Oh,
See, it just
okay.
popped
Yep,
up?
yep.
Okay. Yeah. Now you gotta go,
Now you gotta go up.
yeah, go back up. There, it's okay. To match Brockett Street
Go over
in
this.
style and color. Aluminum storefront windows is what it says. Pre-finished aluminum storefront windows to match Brockett Street. I can't read that, in style and color. Oh, Brockett Street windows in style and color, so,
Is that what it says?
yep, that's what that says. Pre-finished aluminum storefront windows to match Brockett Street windows in style and color.
Match Brockett, is that windows in style and color? Yeah, I guess so.
Yep.
So, what he's building is, it don't look like it to me, but whatever.
Yeah.
Something we missed, I missed it. I guess we all missed it. So what he's building is per the plan. Does that answer your? Any questions from the commissioners?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Quick question. If he was supposed to was he supposed to put this back in place the way it looked? Or was this just going to be a total new design? I mean,
No. It was supposed to be put it.
on the same footprint. I understood that.
Same footprint in exactly the same building that was approved. The look of that building was supposed to be exactly the same of what we approved, and that's what he's, is that what he's building? What it shows on that plan? I don't know.
I have to review the minutes. I don't remember.
Looks like it started to be that way, right? I mean, that kind of looks like, it doesn't have the stucco on it yet. Is, Mr. Planner, is the square footage the same?
Well, I don't know. I haven't done all the research yet.
That's probably what we need to know, what the square footage of this new building is compared to what the old one was.
Yeah.
Mr. Fox?
No, you were talking about, the same. I can imagine he's going to improve the facade, the elevations, rather than just, with clapboard, according to.
No, he's putting the same facade that we approved, and what we approved was a duplication of the building in the back. All the stucco with the ornate design and all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I was talking about. Thank you.
Supposed to match that other building. That's what he's supposed to do. That's what he presented, and that's what he represented. And that's what I insisted on with the CEO when he was negotiating with the owner, that it had to be exactly what we approved. But apparently we missed the second floor, because I was under the impression it was supposed to be a facade, not a second floor on the building. How does that affect the parking? Do we know? Was that ever in the use, was the other square footage used in the calculations of the parking?
Well, I think the CEO knew that it was going to be a second story, and he was the one that did all the analysis of parking. And he was pretty good about letting us know if there was not enough parking for a proposed use or structure. So I think, yes, there is enough parking for the second story, but I'll confirm that.
Does the parking calculations change now with the liquor license? Is there more parking required?
Not for the liquor, but restaurant requires a different amount of parking than
We've
retail.
approved the
But
restaurant already, yeah.
We have already
yeah.
approved the restaurant. I believe when he came in, the floor plan showed a bar in there.
Yes.
I believe it did.
I mean, it's a vast improvement on what the building looked like before.
But
I understand.
Shame on us that we
Yeah.
missed something as critical as that, as the second floor. When we were under the impression, at least some of us, at least Stanley and I were, that it was a facade.
Well, and the existing building on Brockett Street is only one floor, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I guess it's pretty easy to assume that that's what it was going to look like, but then again, what you approved was pretty clear that it had a second story on it.
Okay. So we're good with that. You're gonna.
I'll do some research, but of course, the applicant who's going to come before you tomorrow or next week is the manager for the restaurant. He's the tenant. So the sin, if anything, was the sin of the landlord, not the tenant. So hopefully this won't be a problem for the tenant. And there's no reason why it should be. But there may be a problem for the future Botox doctor who wants to move in upstairs. The staff may end up telling them, no, you can't because there isn't enough parking. I need to confirm that. I think there will be, but I'll have to confirm that.
Yeah, I think we need to know what the square footage of.
Brought up a point when you and I had a discussion that that we don't regulate what goes into like office space.
Well, no, it's not that we don't regulate it. It's just that there's no requirement that it come before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Permitted uses, they come and go, and the commission doesn't know because there's no requirement for you to know. And very often, the zoning staff doesn't even know, because the building department may be presented with a building permit application for electrical or mechanical, but the building inspector won't always know to run it by the zoning department just because someone's applying for mechanicals or wiring or plumbing. So we don't always know when a new tenant comes in.
Right. So under this application, when it comes in for the liquor, can we revisit the calculations for the parking?
Yes.
Okay. And then that way we'll be able to determine whether what the second floor. We might have to tell them you don't have enough parking, you can't use the second floor other than for storage.
Well, what I'm saying is the manager of the restaurant won't care because you're talking about some other space in the building. But you might want that to be part of your discussion, though, so that I can tell the owner of the building that when he comes when he recruits a tenant for the second story, there may be a problem with that.
Or looking for a CO.
For the second story.
For the second story.
Right.
I think we need to make sure we get the square footage of that original building. That's very important.
Mm-hmm. Right, the building as approved by TPZ last year.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I think that should be right on. It should be on original plan.
It is. It is. I just need to do the research. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to schedule that for, when are these two things scheduled?
Your next
for?
meeting.
Okay, very good. And next item is the town planner's report.
Okay, the only item I have to bring to you is, well, first of all, I want to report that we had 13 applicants for the assistant town planner ZEO position. 6 of them were highly qualified, so we will be interviewing the 6 most qualified candidates next week on October 4th, and hopefully we'll have someone on board by the end of the month. By the end of October, because obviously they need to notify their current employer and so forth. But I'm looking at late October to have somebody on board.
We would, as a commission, I think that we would like to see someone with some experience. And, we're going to look for this new person to strictly enforce the regulations and bring more stuff back to this commission before he shoots from the hip.
Right. I think all of the applicants that we're interviewing have either a degree in planning and or are currently a zoning enforcement officer somewhere in Connecticut. Good. So we got a good group of people applying. Okay, so the other item I want to bring to the commission's attention is there's a piece of property on the Berlin Turnpike that it's an existing building. Hang on a second, I have an illustration of it here.
Where the tattoo parlor and the beauty salon is, used to be Variety Homes.
Yeah.
I think it was Variety Homes.
The bond company's
Was
in
it
there.
Variety Homes? No.
No,
Yes.
Variety was the one up further, wasn't
No,
it?
Variety
Oh,
was down here, and then they sold that, moved up there.
Okay.
Right.
That's the piece of property that they're talking about. Where right on the corner is the massage therapist, a tattoo artist, and I don't know what else.
There's a bond company, isn't there a bonding company for?
Yeah, what's the name?
Phelan Bonds or something?
I don't know who all the
Bindery or
tenants.
something?
Well, Briary is the name of the. I think they're 2 women, 2 sisters maybe, who operated as a beauty parlor salon of some sort. But the reason I'm bringing it to you tonight is they want to improve the building. They want to put what I'm calling an atrium in the front of the building to create a more aesthetic presence as you enter the building. It's not really usable space, but it is floor area, so it does require TPC approval. The reason I've been asked to come before you tonight is because, as you can see from the drawing in front of you, all of the parking in front of the building is actually in the highway right-of-way. It's not on site, and this is how much of the property along the Berlin Turnpike is. But in this case, a significant amount of the on-site parking is not really on site, and so the applicants just wanted to run this by the commission to make sure that that this wouldn't be an issue for the commission, since it's an existing situation. It's not as if they're making it any worse. Although by adding some floor area to the building, you could say that they are reducing the amount of parking as a proportion of the total floor area. But the additional floor area that they want to add, as I said, it's really just an atrium. It's not usable space. Now, the consulting engineer is here tonight if you have any questions. But as I said, they just want to know whether this was going to be an issue. Now, as you can see on what I've drawn here, and it's on the screen, the 35-foot setback, that's the no-build zone that we have in Newington, where nothing can be built in front of the setback line. And the applicants are aware of that. They know that they can't build anything closer than 35 feet from the property line. It looks like the two ends of the building already do encroach, but I think that might just be the perspective of this aerial photograph. I suspect they aren't really. You think they do encroach?
They're in the right of
Okay.
way.
They stick out. Let me ask you a question. This yellow line, is that the property line?
Yes.
That is the property line?
Yep.
So they do not have the 35-foot green space plus the 35-foot setback. And they don't have the required parking because they're counting the parking for the state right-of-way. But then, on the other hand,
That's how it is now. They'd be replacing sidewalk with building footprint, basically, is what they want to do.
Mr. Sobieski.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman Ida and Commissioner Payne, maybe you remember, those were three or four individual houses that were put together,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. Variety Homes used to have that display room down there, and then these are the types of houses you wanted, and they sold that, and then they went up farther up the turnpike near,
Where the Greek restaurant is.
yeah. So, and these were all combined and made into businesses, so.
Unfortunately, this situation happens on a lot of other properties, specifically on this end of that end going north. Ruth Chris Steakhouse, some of the other places, if you took the state parking away, they wouldn't have any parking at all.
Right.
It's up to the commission what they want to
Is
do
this
with.
coming in for a public hearing or a site plan?
Just site plan.
So what do they want to do between these two bump outs? They want to enclose it, make it an atrium?
Well, let me invite the applicant's engineer to come up and maybe give you some more insight as to what they're planning to do.
We don't want a full, just
No,
quick.
Can I go up to the screen? I won't even pull out any plans. I think
Sure,
it's
go ahead.
Simple explanation. So,
This is Jim Cassidy.
for the record, Jim Cassidy with the firm Halsey, Pearson and Cassidy. As was mentioned, this structure, I believe it actually used to be, was it T&M? Sorry. Used to be T&M Builders.
Yeah, T&M Builders.
Right. So this was their sales office. There was three structures. When it was converted to office and some personal service spaces, they connected them. So you had the house here, a raised ranch here, and another house down here. They had the parking area in the front. As you mentioned, the yellow line is the state highway line. So what's happened is the tattoo parlor's in here. I think there's a massage therapist in this portion.
Massage therapist is this?
They're in this section now.
Oh, they moved.
Yeah. So what's happening is the hair salon is taking over this portion. What they would like to do is, if you go up to the building right now, there's a series of concrete walks, and you kind of go under a porch into a doorway to get into the front entrance. They want to enhance the front entrance, as Craig said, make a new vestibule, dress up the front of the building. So the addition itself is going to be limited to about a 500 square foot footprint right in this area here. It's not in filling the entire area. And based upon the survey we did, the building is actually not over the 55-foot set or the 35-foot setback line.
It's not?
No, it's not. It's just the perspective of this. So what we asked Craig for is when we take a look at the personal service use based upon the GFA of the building, we have 6,400 square feet of gross floor area. So for personal service, we need 32 parking spaces. Within the site itself, within this line, we actually have 28 spaces. 14 down this side, 3 here, and then I believe it's another 10 or 12 across the front. We're going to be doing some modifications to these parking spaces because, like right now, this handicap space here goes to a set of stairs, so it's not ADA compliant. So we're going to have to slide it over. We are going to be doing some new landscaping and putting a new ADA compliant ramp in here.
So the issue, we're short 4 spaces. So what we're looking for is presently there's it's either 3 or 4 spaces along this island. There's an additional 3 spaces over here, which 2 are over the state highway line. We're just asking for clarification to see whether or not we can count those to our parking needs. If not, then we have to look for additional spot on the property to construct an additional 4 spaces. As mentioned,
Is there another spot to put in the back?
You'd have to build a whole parking lot in the back, and then we get into wetlands permits and all kinds of things too. There's a large wetlands area that runs along the whole back of this property. So, and we have to increase impervious coverage, and with the parking there, you still have from the face of these spaces to the side of those, you still have a 24-foot aisle. So that's why we want to come before the commission and see if they were okay with us using those spaces before we spend their money.
Commissioners?
What's directly behind there? See where the bituminous ends, and it looks like, is that dirt?
This here?
No, right in the back of the building there.
Wooded.
Right up against the back of the building.
This is a lawn area in the back.
That's the lawn?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just beyond that, where you see the tree line, there's
No, I was just wondering what was back here. Maybe you could reduce some of that and make additional parking. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so again, it's going to involve getting a wetlands permit. We'd be pretty close to the wetlands for construction of a park lot, and to have to pick up 4 spaces, it seemed like a lot of work.
Feel as a commission that
Bring it in.
it's got to come in, obviously, but
I don't want to prejudge anything. I think we should, if he wants to, he has the right to bring it in for site plan, and we'll look at it then. It's hard to, I mean, without the actual plans and seeing everything, how can we say,
Yeah, well, obviously these 4 parking places short.
So this needs to come in front of us.
Yes.
Because of their 4 parking spaces short, or because of the addition that they're adding?
Because of the, it's a site plan.
Your regulations say anytime we add an addition in the Berlin Turnpike along the front of the building, we need to have a site plan approval, no matter what the size of the addition is.
Okay.
There's other.
I thought it was 10%, but on the Berlin Turnpike.
That's if it's on the side or to the back, but if it's in the front along the Berlin Turnpike, no choice. We got to come for a site plan approval.
It's got to come in anyway. Why don't you bring it in, and we'll have to. The vice chairman brings up a good point. We should bring it in and discuss it as part of a meeting.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Okay, that was all that I had in my town planner report.
Okay, next item, communications. Any communications to bring forward the commission? Payne?
Yeah, I just want the commissioners to know there was a temporary sign that was approved by our commission at the last meeting for spooky Halloween or spooky something. Spooktown. I noticed that we approved 1 banner for the building, but I noticed that there was pennants and then another banner draped over the directory sign. So I asked the town planner to look into that, and maybe he could give us a report on it.
Right, yes, I went out there the next day, and sure enough, I saw the pennants that Vice Chairman Payne mentioned, and the manager of the Spooky Town had wrapped the existing pylon sign out in front with 2 large pieces of yellow plastic that said Spooky Town. I guess it was maybe stapled or screwed to the pylon sign. So I contacted her, and I told her that the pendants she needs to remove because our sign regulations don't allow the pendants. And I also told her that what she had done to the existing pylon sign was not acceptable, because although we are not allowed by the Constitution to regulate content of a sign, TPZ is allowed to regulate the material and the size and the location. And a piece of plastic is not an acceptable material. She said yes, but she said there was a tall young man with glasses in the zoning department who told her that it was okay because it's an existing pylon sign, and that she was just changing the message. And I said, oh, I guess that would be Mike D'Amato, the previous zoning enforcement officer. And so I told her, well, if that's what he told you, then I forget exactly how I put it, but that's what she had said. And so I mentioned that to Vice Chairman Payne, I think if that's what he told her, we probably should live with it. If it's any consolation, it's a temporary business. It'll be gone after Halloween. But in the meantime, she was told she could have it by the former CEO.
Thank you.
You want to press the issue? You want to, Halloween is 30 days from
Yeah, by the time you get anywhere with it, it's
gonna be
going
over
to be
with
down,
anyway.
gone, so.
We just got to insist that right after Halloween, that they take it down.
Right.
There a time period on the sign on the building too?
Yeah, 25 days.
Okay. Adhere to the 25 days. Okay. Any other communications? Any other things? Public participation? Carol? No? We'll hold off remarks by commissioners. Any remarks at this time? Okay, we're going to go into executive session with the town attorney for 2 items that pending litigation. Any motion to go into executive session?
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we could do it right here. If